recording. All right, cool. So welcome everyone today. Sorry for any confusion on the meeting times. We moved this one as a one-off for my coworker, my colleague Oliver, who's in Sydney. So the 9 a.m. meeting time does not work well for them. So I appreciate those of you coming and making this time work. So right now we have two agenda items. Oliver is going to give us a demo of osv.dev, and we'll have some time for discussion or any Q&A around that. And then Amir's got a quick presentation on critical projects. And then if there are any other items, feel free to add them. And if not, maybe we'll get out a little bit early. So with that, Oliver, do you want to kick it off and maybe give a brief intro for yourself?
Sure. Hey, I'm Oliver. I work with Kim on a lot of open source security work. I think she already mentioned I'm from Sydney, Australia. So I apologize if my speech is a bit slurred. It's a bit early here. I'm still trying to wake up. Hopefully I can still give a big presentation of something we're working on called OSV. Let me just present. Can everyone see my screen, by the way?
Yep, you're good.
Right.
Oh, not only is it 7 a.m., but Google gave us a day off. So Oliver is here on his day off, and I owe him big time.
Thank you, Oliver.
So good. Just a sec.
I appreciate the dedication. Wow. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm having some trouble.
If you prefer me present the slides, I could do that too if you want to shoot me the link quick, if you want to keep your version open.
It's just that it's easier for me to do the demo. Sorry, just give me a sec.
No
Maybe we can't. I'll rejoin the meeting.
Thanks, David, for adding the notes. Our Sydney office is, I think it's reopened now. So I had my first meeting with a Googler yesterday that was in an office, and we all sort of almost fell over, like, oh my gosh, we haven't seen that in so long. And then the fire alarm or something went off and they all had to evacuate, so. All right, I'll take that.
Truly the full experience, Kim.
Welcome back.
Okay, I think this is working now. Cool. All right. I think it's working. Thanks everyone for coming. So I wanted to give a quick demo on something I'm working on called OSV. So this is short for open source vulnerabilities, and it's a vulnerability database and automation infrastructure that we're building for open source. So the reason we built this is because we've had a lot of issues with dealing with tracking open source vulnerabilities in our own open source dependencies at Google. And this is because CVEs have a bunch of issues with using them for open source dependencies. Traditionally, it's been pretty difficult to build automated tools for them. They have been difficult to pass. And the key issue is with the lack of precise versioning for CVEs. In particular, it's really difficult to take a CVE and match that to an exact version and package of a vulnerability, exact version of a package that we're using as a dependency. And on the flip side, generating the precise information that we want to see and requesting CVEs is also quite difficult. So we've also seen a lot of open source maintainers not take the steps to generate the required information and request CVEs in the first place. So we end up with a lot of missed vulnerabilities. So to address this, we launched something called OSV a few months back, I think 1 or 2 months ago. And so again, this is a open source vulnerability database and automation infrastructure for vulnerabilities in open source. And the key difference with CVEs is that we promote precise versioning for each vulnerability. So for each vulnerability, we automatically perform bisections and look at the upstream repository to determine the precise ranges of both commits and also just version numbers that might be affected for each vulnerability. And currently, we have a pipeline set up to automatically import a few thousand vulnerabilities from something called OSS Fuzz, which is a free continuous fuzzing infrastructure that we run for over 400 now critical open source projects. Most of these are C, C++ projects, but we do support Go, Rust, and Python and Java as well. And we're also planning to expand our set of data with other ecosystems. So for example, NPM and Go vulnerabilities, we definitely want to see them flow into OSV as well. So now let's just jump into a quick demo. I think that will help explain a lot of what this looks like. So this is the main web UI for OSV. This is where you can see the list of all of our vulnerabilities that we have. And if you click on one, you can see all the details that we track for each vulnerability. So we've tried to keep the metadata we store as simple as possible. So the key interesting information here is the commit which introduces the vulnerability and the commit which fixes the vulnerability. And from there, we can also automatically determine by looking at the repository and the tags it has the exact versions that also contain this vulnerability. And we also expose the same information via the API. So we have a very simple endpoint where you simply provide a commit hash, and you don't have to provide anything else because commit hashes should be fairly unique. Sorry, I see a question. Okay, how is introduced and determined? So for OSS Fuzz bugs, we do bisections. So OSS Fuzz is a fuzz infrastructure, so we're lucky there in that we have a reliable way of reproducing bugs for every vulnerability we find. And that means we can perform bisections to reliably determine the commit which introduces a bug. So you can see here, this vulnerability was introduced by this commit, and we do bisection as well to figure out the fixed commit as well. Does that answer your question, Chris?
Not entirely. So basically, you have to be using OSS Fuzz, and because you run fuzzing on every single version, you can tell when it was introduced. Is that right?
We don't actually run fuzzing on every single version, but we can build every single version. So we have an extra step where we run a bisect to figure out the exact commit.
Okay, I guess I don't understand what bisect is, but maybe I gotta go read about that.
Right, yeah, yeah, you can think of it as if we are running every single version and we can figure out the exact commit, which started crashing.
Yeah, bisect's a capability built into tools like Get, so you can, if it was introduced, when was it introduced? Well, I'll check out the version 2 years ago. If it wasn't in there, that must be between 2 years ago and now. I'll check on the one that was done last year and go. I'm gonna do a binary search. There are problems with that, though. I mean, if the API changes, the vulnerability may have been there earlier, but bisect won't be able to tell.
Yeah, I was going to mention it later, but I just put in a chat. I'm involved with another project that looks for the introducing commits on vulnerabilities, and the goal is a research database. It's vulnerabilityhistory.org there, and there's a lot of challenges with like figuring out when a vulnerability is actually introduced. We call them the VCC, the vulnerability contributing commit. And we have some automation called ArcheoGit to automate that. and we just did a manual validation of the algorithms in there. And, there's a lot of challenges in terms of picking up sort of spurious changes. And I didn't know if you had any workarounds on that, or, or if you knew that you can get a lot of false positives that way.
Yeah, sure. So the bisection is best effort, and we see that if this works for the majority of cases, but in the cases where this does not work, we do provide a way for users to kind of fix up any incorrect information, and I'll demonstrate that as well as part of this demo.
Thanks.
Cool. Yeah, so I think I was talking about the API. Yeah, so we provide the API as well to that people query for vulnerabilities. So one way to do this is by providing just a commit hash. You don't have to provide anything else. You just paste your API, and the API will return any vulnerability in any package that we know about, and return this result in this JSON format that we defined. Alternatively, you can also do the same query by providing a version number and a package name here. So in this case, the arrow at version 2.0.0, and we see that this same vulnerability is returned by our API. So that was kind of how a user of an open source package would probably might use our service. But as Chris mentioned before, there might be issues or inaccuracies with using automation to determine all of our data. So we do want to provide a way for people to manually fix up any inaccuracies as well. So this is a repo that isn't actually public yet. So this is a bit of a preview. We are probably going to make this public in a matter of days. So this is the automated repository of vulnerabilities, OSS fuzz vulnerabilities from OSV. So all the files here are automatically imported. And these are the same data that we expose through our API. And the interesting thing about this repo is that this is interactive and there's a lot of automation involved. So as a user, I have a test commit here. I might come in and fix up at the fixed commit range, and I want the infrastructure to recompute all the versions that are affected. So I make this commit, and then the infrastructure comes in very quickly after and says, okay, this affects version 3.9.0, and they'll update the modified field. So that's just an example of some automation that we can do here. There's a bit more under the hood that we're doing, so stuff like bisection. And we really want to generalize this to help other ecosystems with managing vulnerabilities. So for example, generalizing our bisection infrastructure so that we can provide a mechanism for people to bisect any vulnerability, even if they don't come from a fuzzing source. And in general, just trying to reduce the amount of work it takes to maintain a vulnerability database and have quality, precise version information. And yeah, so that's about it for the demo. Hopefully I didn't miss out anything important. So happy to take any questions or any clarifications.
Yeah. Thanks, Lori. Great presentation. Thanks for presenting it. I think there is similar effort from other open source community, right? Like a problem with the CPEs and everything. So there is a spec called package URL. So it also addresses the same thing, right? Like not to manually summon to describe a version of a software or something like that. So having package URL support, it is great. Like a package URL is already used in SPOM standards and many open source tools and even commercial tools. Like they are moving away from CPE to package URL. So if you guys can support package URL query, right? So it's similar to your existing queries, but I don't think it's that complicated. It should be straightforward, right? So it can add great value for other ecosystem to search in your database.
Sure. Yeah. I think it definitely something we can easily add. So all the necessary data is already there in our database. I think we can easily add a new API endpoint where you provide a package URL instead of just an individual ecosystem and package name. It's just that at this point we are more focused on getting more sources of data into our database. So all of our work is focused on that for now. And then perhaps once we get to a good state there, we can look at making more improvements to our API.
Yeah, thanks.
How do you envision the data being used?
So just as an example, if you do a pip install, there is no mechanism today which checks for vulnerabilities in your pip packages. There are commercial tools out there, but we really want the open source world to kind of land on a common set of tooling that works on a common format to deal with vulnerabilities. So our main use case, I guess, is people who use open source packages in any open source package ecosystem, like npm, PyPy, could be Go modules, anything.
Thanks.
Any other questions for Oliver?
Are you guys planning to parse existing NVD database or any other private database to convert to your OSV or any other similar effort, like to, yeah, how you're planning to get more vulnerability feed into your database?
Sure. So definitely we are working on tools to help look at the existing NVD database, for example, and try to automate as much of a process as possible in providing. We think there will always need to be some human element involved. Automation is not enough to scrape CVEs; otherwise, CVEs would be sufficient to as a source of vulnerability. So we're definitely building tools to automatically look at these feeds and provide a list of things for a human to look at and perhaps add to a database and of vulnerabilities. So we are working with looking at, for example, Python vulnerabilities. So there is no existing Python community maintained vulnerability database. There are commercial feeds like PyUp and Sneak, but we think there is benefit in a community maintained one, and we'll definitely provide tooling to help with bootstrapping that.
Thanks.
Yeah, a quick FYI, I know the Ruby community does have one you might find looking at them with of interest.
Yeah, for sure. I understand that the Ruby one is literally a single person working on it on the spare time. So if they're away for a weekend, it just doesn't get updated. So we definitely reach out to that person as well to figure out if there's something we can do to help them.
I think we may have learned that fact in this working group too. Maybe it was a different one, but yeah, one lone maintainer trying to keep Ruby.
It's a familiar story.
One's more than zero.
That's true. Cool. All right. Well, thank you so much, Oliver. Feel free to drop off and go enjoy your vacation.
Yes, thank you very much.
All right. I'll get a copy to his slides too and post them in the notes as well. Amir, you want to take it away?
Sure. So I'm going to present my screen and show a document. I didn't really do too much in terms of a presentation, but have it document, and Derek's gonna kind of go through the document with us.
Yeah, it's a team effort today.
All right. So.
Okay, so what I wanted to share with you guys today is something we've been working on for a few months now. For those of us who know what we do, this is a continuation of what we've been doing for the last 5 years. For those of you who have never heard of us, what we do is open source auditing. We raise money from usually corporate backers. We audit projects based on whether we think they're critical infrastructure or not. We post all of the tools and research online publicly for everybody to view, and everyone gains the benefits of that research. So we are going to propose to the OpenSSF an audit program where we specifically target projects that were identified by this working group as important. Amir, if you can scroll down a bit to our objectives here. So we've pulled data from the criticality score project, the LISH Census 2 project, and that recent underproduction paper to build a list of 25 projects. I'm not going to show that list today because we have 23 people in this room, and I guarantee we're going to have 23 different answers on what should be on that list. We used a very data-driven approach. There were some projects that fell off of this list that I personally wanted on there. But we are going to show this to the TAC, and they're going to decide whether these projects are actually important or not, or whether we should tweak this list, etc. What we have been spending most of our time on is scoping these projects appropriately so that we can come up with an actual budget. Because one of the things that we have heard when we've gone to groups for money is we need to know exactly how much money you're asking for. And that's a question we can never, ever answer because this stuff is very vague. We use a bidding system between 12 competing organizations who bid on every project. And we narrow it down by not just cost, but the qualifications of the people who are doing the work to make sure that they can appropriately evaluate each project. We also try to impact the projects themselves as little as possible. We approach them, we tell them the audit's going on, we report the issues as they come in. If they have questions for us, the audit team is tasked with answering all of their questions and helping them with remediation. So we are at the phase now where we have all of this data prepared and we need to secure funding for this. And then as we move forward from there, we're going to actually, we can begin the work as soon as we have money, frankly. We are prepared with many, many security teams who can work on this in parallel. I really don't want to get into the nitty-gritty of the entire process. I will let questions handle that because we're going to be all over the place with that stuff. So do you want to scroll down past the objectives here, Amir?
Before you do, why don't you real quickly identify your data sources at least? You've listed at the top there, but you haven't actually said what they are.
Absolutely. We're using the Google Criticality Score project. We're using the LISH survey. We are using the recent underproduction paper that we just went over in this group. And then we also look at the dependency trees from the top projects, and we have an extensive advisory council of experts who advises us on narrowing down the list, because we initially came up with like 38 or 39 projects, which we whittled down to 25 for various reasons. Does that cover it, David?
Yep.
Okay, wanted to make sure. Can you scroll down, Amir? Yes, I do want to emphasize that this project list can be changed, but that we've done a lot of the upfront legwork and scoping. So if we do change the list, we have to go back and do some additional work that's going to increase cost. I just want to make sure that that's abundantly clear, because I think that everybody's going to have the urge to get all of their pet projects on this list. And that is fine if we're adding to the list, but if we're taking things away, we're kind of killing some work. And also, we tried to take the best data-driven approach we could to selecting these projects. So I'm hoping that it's a very good list. Out of the members of the OpenSSF corporate-wise, every single member has an interest in at least 3 or 4 of these. So hopefully, everybody will be at least somewhat happy with the list. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about the critical advantages. We are designed from the ground up to solve a lot of the problems monetarily that projects run into when it comes to getting security work done. This can be everything from projects that have no central authority, no business entity, no bank account, so they need somebody to hold things in escrow or pay for things. We work with the projects directly to make sure that we aren't disrupting their work and just dumping a bunch of bugs on them and saying, hey, go figure it out. That's not how we function. Additionally, if the project is abandonware, we will either work toward getting the security team to make pull requests, or we will advise the community to use an alternative. What else is on here? Oh, and then we talk about what to expect. So what we do is we facilitate security fixes, and we try to help projects make long-term fixes to close classes of bugs. So we advise them on how we found the bugs, what tooling we used to do it, and how this problem surfaced so that it can be remediated over the long term. And that prevents future bugs from occurring as well. And then additionally, we make everything we do public. You can read every single one of our audits on our website, ostif.org. We have many of them. I think we've closed 370 bugs to date, something like that. And then additionally, I personally write a 10-minute read synopsis of every project, which is also on our website. Those are designed to be a quick read if you don't want to read the 70-page scientific documents.
Hey, Derek, you're saying 370 bugs fixed so far. How long you've been working on this?
We've been operating a pilot program for 5 years on a shoestring budget. Yeah. To be completely honest, 95% of my work is currently fundraising.
Sure.
So if we actually secured backing and hit the ground running for an entire year, we would have probably 5-fold that number in under a year.
Is there and I'm not, is now a good time to ask questions? Or are you in the?
Sure. No, this is a discussion. So I really, really want to hear your thoughts.
Well, I'm trying to see if I can understand better about what you're doing. So if, for example, there's a project on the list that you say, golly, it would be great if this is a project that has a lot of dependencies. It's not very maybe fixing bugs very quickly or looking at security issues. You describe some of what you do. You'd say, hey, we found some bugs. Here's some fixes, and here's maybe some architectural things to help, kind of improve things. So eliminate classes of bugs and stuff like that. Is that
exactly.
okay? And the money is, I'm trying to connect the dots here. So the
Mhm.
money goes to hire more people who are developers who can do this work. Is that the idea?
Yes, the money hires security experts that do the reviewing and, if needed, create the fixes.
Okay.
In our
And
experience, that's not needed, but we are running into a
it's,
couple of projects where we
when you
expect
say
that's going to
it's not
happen.
usually needed because you file the bugs and then they fix it without you having to do the code.
Yes, and it's
Okay.
usually within 24 to 48 hours.
Okay.
People are very proactive about fixing security bugs, generally, in our experience.
And you have a track record then on your website where you can see the kind of
Yes.
the
Actually, I think if we scroll down, Amir has 2 examples in our supporting evidence section here, where we can talk about 2 of our things. Yeah, here. So we did OpenSSL version 1.1.1, which is the version that implemented TLS 1.3. And that's important because one of the things that we learned is not to reinvent the wheel when it comes to security audits. We wait for a major release where a lot of code is changed or green because it's adding new features or making significant changes to the software, and then we do an audit. And because this had a lot of green code, we looked at the new PRNG and all of the TLS 1.3 code, and they made, let me look, 15 potential security fixes. Now that was alpha code, so we don't call them CVEs or anything like that.
Yeah.
But there were 15 fixes that were applied because of that research. And then additionally, Unbound DNS, which is the next project, made 48 fixes as a result of our audits. And of those, 6, I think, were severe, so high or critical CVSS scores. And then there's a bunch of additional projects on our website, but those were 2 good examples.
And the other question I had was research that we've heard about from Harvard has, suggested that, money to, it's not always easy to connect money as a motivator for open source work,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
And so it sounds like what you're doing here is a little bit of a, hey, let's hire some security people with money who can go into the projects and help them understand what their security, vulnerabilities are, et cetera.
Exactly.
I'm trying to play the movie forward here. Let's say, someone comes up with a big hunk of money, right? And you
Right.
go, great, we can go address all these things, right? And then people sort of say, okay, good, problem solved. And then your, hired security experts go off to do other things, right? Are we going to be, back in the situation we're in now?
No.
And this is one of the part of I want to sort of think about sort of how do we make lasting change in these things. So that's kind of you see where I'm going on this.
Yes, absolutely. So that is why we focus on closing classes of bugs and educating the developers on specifically how issues came to be, so that the problems don't resurface as development continues on that project. Additionally, we do, if we have the budget for it, want to be able to circle back to these projects every time they make a major release to look at green code. And that is to give us the long-term surety that these critical pieces of infrastructure are constantly validated.
Okay,
change audits are often significantly cheaper than the first-time review of software because
I'd love for you to work yourself out of a job. No offense,
right. That's where we would like to be too.
Or probably the better way of doing it, if once you've picked off the lowest hanging fruit, you can keep working up the tree, but not have to go back and revisit these things, right? I'd love it if there were, for example, OpenSSL. I don't have a clarity as to whether they will no longer need sort of the expert help to fix their stuff. Right.
Yeah. Additionally, we also consider, other security libraries at the same time. So if we're done, we're never really done, but if we're done with OpenSSL, we could take a look at Russell's, which is brand new. So there's a lot of opportunity there. Yeah, we do have to be careful because it is a well of infinite depth where we could just go through. I could probably personally name 300 or 400 projects that would be interesting. And, you know, we're never going to find the money for everything, but we could prioritize at least this important stuff.
And start.
Right. And get the ball rolling.
One question I have, and I've been thinking about this a little bit, is, you know, before Google would help, you know, fund something like this, is making sure that, you know, every single project on the list sort of has buy-in from the maintainers.
Yep.
Thing that we discussed as well here, like we don't want to go in and piss off a whole bunch of people. Have you thought about that at all as you went through your project list, like making sure you get buy-in from the project maintainers?
Yes, so far we haven't encountered a project that has said we don't want security review or security help. If we did encounter that, I would hope there would be some type of negotiation or meeting that we could have that would change their minds. I'm an infinite optimist when it comes to that sort of thing, but we would have to cross that bridge when we come to it. I can't imagine it's going to be a pervasive problem. If it did happen, it would be a one-off thing.
I suspect probably in many of these cases, it's like, you know, I know of one really important open source package, I could name it, where the maintainer is literally a rocket scientist that works for NASA. And, you know, there may be a bunch of things, which is like we've sent them changes, and it's like, not bringing them in because they're off on a launch in, I don't know, Texas or something like that, right?
Right.
So this is the reality that we have in the open source world. So I'm guessing it's probably more one of, okay, I'll get to that at some point, but not necessarily right away. So.
Yeah, and there's definitely that piece of negotiation that goes on every time we talk about doing a project. Sometimes they just want to clean up their code before we do an audit. That actually happened with Unbound. They did a bunch of patching before we came in and did the security review. So yeah, it is a negotiation process, but usually because we come in and say, hey, you know, free security consulting, we're going to help you guys out. Most people are very supportive of that.
Derek, are you ready to share your list, or are you still working on that list through the process you just described?
The list is complete as far as we're concerned, but we're going to share it with the TAC rather than the working group. My biggest concerns right now are, one, that everybody's going to be unhappy with the list because that's the nature of lists. And two, that there is approximately 300 hours of my own work in this, and somebody could just take it.
Yeah, and but before you even do that, though, this is something that I was chatting about. Like the OSSF doesn't have a way of funding anything through the OSSF right now. It's something that the government needs to do, and I unfortunately don't have an update on when that's going to land. So that's just the situation we're in.
Yeah, I'm aware of that. So I'm wondering if we're going to have to talk to people individually and try to figure something out, or if we can wait, or, you know, what it's going to come down to.
Yeah. Yeah. I know we're interested on the Google side. So if other, you know, large companies would like to talk to us about this together, happy to have that conversation. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I know we do have a meeting with Kay next week, possibly as well.
Okay. Yeah.
Have you considered, I just guessing, like, it seems like you're just generally building interest in the effort through us and hoping that we'd go tell our friends?
Yes. This is the dry run, so to speak, where we can actually, you know, have some discussions. If there's problems here, I want to hear about it. If there's concerns, I want to hear them, because we try to do this in the most transparent way possible. I understand we're not showing the list, and that's not transparent, but we're going to show the list very soon. I just want to be in a position where we can say, here's the list, give us the money, let's go. And because the the grant process hasn't been set up yet at OpenSSF. I don't want to get in a situation where the list goes out there and then somebody else tries to steal the work, more or less.
So for the record, I don't see what the risk is in stealing the list. And the list is really the front end to the value of the process.
So to be candid, there are some security companies that are operating in these channels, and they have secured funding for specific projects that we've identified in the past. And they do it.
Oh, to like do it for the government or somebody?
They do it through either for a company or for a government, or and they do it in a not transparent fashion. So their research is not released like ours is,
So,
etc.
For example, Ion Channel, or you don't want to say?
Yeah, I don't want to give specific examples, but
You know, the at least as far as my company's concerned, we've done a bit of analysis of the open source projects that our products depend on the most. And we are, I've got a data scientist working on this. Unfortunately, he's on spring break, so he hasn't gotten the answer back. But I wanted to do a cross correlation between what he's done in this, or what Intel, that list, and a list that came out of this University of Washington research project that we heard about a couple of weeks ago, which were the underproduced projects that they found in Debian. So what one of my data scientists is to tell me is, where's the cross correlation, and is there one, as a way to kind of help motivate some of the folks here, at least relative to the So the one, and again, sometimes the total accuracy of the process is not as important as the having at least. I try not to let the perfect be the enemy of good enough, and it may be that we may come up with slightly different lists, but in any case, if there's hoping that Kim and others, that we could think in terms of not boiling the ocean, but seeing are there a collection. My intuition is that there's probably 7 to 9 projects that are, if we could make a big difference on, this year, it would help the community to a very large extent, right? That would be one contention that I've been arguing with my folks here about, not arguing, discussing. We don't argue here. And the other is, I'm guessing the preference would be to funnel some contributions through Linux Foundation, as opposed to, so if we can work out that, I don't know that for a fact. I'm trying to get the people with the purse strings to tell me the answer on this question, but I'm guessing that might be at least having the Linux Foundation on the hook to make sure this stuff, functions in a way that's. I mean, we're very familiar with Linux Foundation, right? I guess I'll put it that way.
Right. And we work closely with the LF. We are actually on the LFX platform as an option for auditing projects. So we could, in theory, just create an LFX project that says, OSTIF, open source security program. And if everybody contributes to it, all this stuff gets done. And that would be an easy vehicle for everybody to contribute to that's trusted, et cetera.
Yeah, the one thing that disappoints me, which I don't think you're necessarily charged with being able to fix, is I wish we could figure out how to make durable changes to these projects. I have a fear that, in spite of your best efforts, they're just going to continue to putter along without the right sort of support. And part of what the open source community may want to do is advocate for projects that are supported. I mean, to be honest, you mentioned SSL as a perfect example. I mean, maybe Russell's or, other options like that, or Boring SSL, which I think is a Google fork of OpenSSL. I mean, there's some, that may be a better, path. Well, I don't want to, nobody has any control on any of this, but that's one of the advocacies that might be a good option.
Absolutely, yes. If we ever ran into a project that said we simply refuse to fix this issue and we have a proof of concept that shows it's an issue, then we're just going to recommend alternatives. That's just how that is the only way to go once we get that wall.
sorry.
No, good.
Riffing on David's idea, I mean, if there's infrastructure you can set up on projects, or patterns and guide rails and other things you can do within the project, right, that prevent the repetition of mistakes, right? So is it introducing static analysis to projects, or doing other, architectural level things in the projects that make them more safe, in perpetuity?
Yes.
That might be more appealing to funders than just saying, like, I'm going to basically be a contract pen tester for.
Exactly. So the idea is to give them the ability to do their own security review from that point forward and evaluate whether any new changes are creating problems. So static analysis, dynamic analysis. One of the things that we also do is look at if they are fuzzing their code, the coverage is often incomplete. So we will have engineers do the work to fuzz all of the code and then provide that to them so that they can fuzz all of their components. Wider coverage is really important when it comes to that. And when you fix one problem with fuzzing, when you fix an issue with fuzzing, often the fuzzer can go deeper then and find issues in other layers of code, because the first issue was causing a crash, so the second issue was undiscovered. So things like that are what we tend to focus on. We tend to avoid pen testing. It's actually closer to manual review. And if there are gaps in tooling, we'll apply those tools and then show them how they were used.
And do you fix normal bugs if you accidentally find them?
Sorry, what's that?
Do you fix normal bugs if you accidentally find them, which are not security related?
Yes, we actually do. We found some performance bugs in the OpenSSL PRNG that actually led to a pretty substantial increase in entropy. So yeah, there's some good benefits that come out of closing all of these bugs that we find.
I'd had a question, but I didn't want to, I already asked one, so I didn't want to jump in too fast here. I'm trying to understand the audit methodology. You said it was more manual review than pen testing, so it's more of a
Yes.
looks like
If
code
we-
review and fuzzing, and is that right? Okay.
Yes, that's accurate.
I'm reading the report on OpenSSL as we speak, so I'm sort of absorbing while I'm talking. But yeah.
Right, that was a two-parter. So we had JP Almason, who is a PhD level cryptographer, review just the PRNG, because that is a critical piece of software, and they completely re-engineered it. So he did a review first, and then we had Quark's lab come in and do a review of all the TLS 1.3 code. And then they also looked at the PRNG after all of the fixes were applied by JP's review. So in aggregate, we had, I can't remember what the total is, but from the presentation.
Quick question. Are you guys currently partnering with Google's Project Zero team, or are you planning to do that in future? Like, I think they are also focusing a similar effort, right? Project Zero.
Oh, Google Project Zero. Yes, it's literally Google Project Zero, only more targeted and more of it. The Project Zero guys do amazing work, and I actually got the idea for OSTIF from Project Zero. The difference being the Project Zero guys just work on whatever they want, and we work on something that's very, very targeted. And we try to solve all of the little issues that come up with individual projects that are barriers to them getting security review. Does that make sense? I want to make sure I'm answering your question.
Thanks. I just want to know, I mean, if you guys are working, I mean, they do the similar fuzzing and other,
Yeah, absolutely.
You guys want to do, right? Like they do have experience and expertise doing the same thing. So maybe partnering with them. I mean, they may have a different focus projects or something like that, but they can share the knowledge of tools or infrastructure, and they have so many things at Google, right? So,
Yeah, definitely. I would actually 1000% support some help from Project Zero. We've approached them a couple times before, but the response was something like they're concerned about conflicts of interest arising. I'm not sure exactly how that works with open source software, but that was the response that we got. So
I can help there probably if you want to follow up with me.
okay. Yeah, excellent.
One idea that I've been working on a little bit and trying to get LF to help flesh this through is sometimes a lot of these projects, what they need is help not with code. So I'm hoping that I will be able to stand something up soon that basically says like, hey, if you're, you know, a popular open source project but need help with things like your logo, documentation, code reviews, like let's get you the help that you need so you can actually go focus on, you know, writing the code and fixing security issues. So I'm hoping I can share something more around that soon. If other folks are interested in that idea, feel free to reach out to me too.
Yeah, that's what I find interesting about the LFX system is that we can set up a project for an entity that has no bank account, no business entity, nothing like that, can't even handle money in a legal fashion that's not going to cause an IRS nightmare for whoever's donating. And we can basically escrow all of that for them, and they don't have to handle any funds. They don't have to, you know, worry about selecting the right people. It's just all done for them. It makes the whole process easier. So it's like trying to solve all of those edge case issues as well as doing auditing services.
Well, thank
For
you.
funding, you might want to consider the BSA as well. It might be a shorthand way of accessing a lot of major corporations.
The BSA.
There's something Software Alliance. They traditionally did
Boy Scouts of
licensing.
America? No.
Yeah, not them. They traditionally did like license enforcement for Microsoft and things like that.
Okay.
And Oracle, but they had a lot of the major software organizations are a member of that. It's a trade group.
Okay, I will look into that. Okay.
Well, thank you so much, everybody. Really appreciate the feedback. And yeah, we're just gonna.
Yes, this is much more positive than I expected.
Yeah, send over details when you're ready.
Yeah, we will have them for you very quickly. I'm glad that everybody seems excited about this.
Cool. All right, only about 5 minutes left. Should we call it a day? Any other last minute questions? Cool. All right,
Good.
well, thanks everyone.
Good meeting.
All right.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Yeah, thank you so much, everybody.